All right, guys, welcome to Flav Oriana's MMA show. I'm your host, Flav Oriana, brought to you by Four Corner Sports. All right, guys, so UFC 272 is officially in the books. It was main evented by Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. The UFC was riding it to the very end on the friends that became foes, roommates turned into enemies, this, that, and the third. But we finally were able to see the matchup. Remember, Masvidal and Covington have been having a bad feud with each other ever since Covington ended up winning the welterweight interim title belt in Chicago. I believe it was 2019, if I'm not mistaken, when he ended up defeating Rafael Dos Anjos, who was also on the UFC 272 card, and he was on the co-main event. How oddly enough. Surprisingly, RDA was not part of the press conference. It was only Masvidal and Covington, but overall, decent main event. We knew what to expect when it comes to Colby Covington. Colby Covington, in my opinion, is the second best welterweight in the world, right behind Kamaru Usman. And the commentators, Michael Bisping and Joe Rogan, have said it numerous times last night, that if there was no Kamaru Usman in the world, if there was no Kamaru Usman in the UFC, Colby Covington right now would be the welterweight champion. I mean, the man is one of the best wrestlers in the UFC roster. The man has an onslaught pressure that he makes his opponents, back down against the cage, and he'll pin him against the cage and just tire them out. He has a tremendous gas tank. He has incredible cardio. His striking has definitely improved over the years. I mean, we saw in that Robbie Lawler fight. We saw how it was on that UFC 245 card when he fought Kamaru Usman for the very first time. We saw when he fought Kamaru Usman for the second time in the Madison Square Garden card this past November. We also saw when he fought Tyron Woodley back in September of 2020 when he ended up winning Woodley, and he ended up winning by TKO because of a rib injury that he ended up applying towards Woodley during ground and pound. So Masvidal comes into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak. Hasn't won a fight since he defeated Nate Diaz in Madison Square Garden of 2019. He lost to the champ twice. First time, he took the fight on 6 days' notice. Had to fly to Abu Dhabi. Lost by unanimous decision. Second fight, they fight in Jacksonville. The first fight in front of fans. Gets knocked out in one of the more scarier knockouts I've ever seen, and one of the more vicious knockouts that I've ever seen as well. Kamaru Usman puts the lights out on Masvidal, and Masvidal hasn't fought since then. Fights Covington. Going into the fight, I'm thinking Masvidal, he needs to get going in the first 2 rounds, because if it goes into the championship rounds, goes into rounds 4 and 5, it's gonna get very tricky, and it's gonna get very Masvidal's gas tank isn't the greatest against wrestlers. We've seen how he is when he fights wrestlers, and it just doesn't look that great. And what ends up happening? Well, if you're a very logical, MMA fan, you would know that Colby Covington would have the number on him, because Colby Covington pressures him, has him against the cage. He has him on the ground, beating him up, throwing ground strikes, right? Tiring out Masvidal, making sure Masvidal is carrying Covington's weight. All right, and just pinning him against the cage, and it wasn't pretty at all. Covington, in my eyes, he ended up winning. I wanted to be fair. I wanted to say 50-45, but I mean, you can argue there was a 50-44. Some people said it was a 50-43. I mean, other people said there was a 49-46 because they wanted to award Masvidal when he ended up dropping Colby Covington in round 4 by with that lucky right hand. Because think about it, that was the only time that Masvidal had a good opening, but he was so tired in round 4 that he didn't have the ability to capitalize in that moment. I think if he would have had a little bit more energy, he would have been able to, kick it into like 3rd gear and then just go straight for the kill. But he didn't have it anymore because Covington drained him out. He put him into a position where if he was to get hurt, he would be able to recover, because Masvidal doesn't have the energy to expend on trying to capitalize on that moment. And that's what ended up happening. He had that one moment and he couldn't capitalize on it because fatigue and, just being beaten down. Now what happens next for both of these fighters? Now, that's the tricky part, because they're both in a weird situation. Now, Covington, He's in that Caitlyn Chukagian type of role where he could just knock out contenders to avoid facing Usman and then eventually get awarded a title shot for the third time? Or does he take a fight with Dustin Poirier? I mean, they both have heat with one another. Or does he jump up to 185? Now, my personal opinion, I think you go with the Dustin Poirier fight. You make that money. I mean, Poirier made himself a name with the casuals last year by defeating Conor McGregor twice and fighting for the belt. Yes, he came up short, but honestly, that first 7 minutes of the fight against Charles Oliveira, that was very, very, very exciting, and he definitely won a lot of fans because of that. He would have won a lot more fans if he ended up winning the title, but Charles Oliveira, he's one of the best in the world, and there's a reason why he's holding the belt and Dustin Poirier isn't. The UFC could go with Covington versus Poirier. There's a lot of heat. There's a lot of bad blood against one another. You got Covington once again talking bad, talking ill will about somebody's wife and child. Poirier, says it's on site if he sees him, but doesn't want to fight him in the octagon because he doesn't want to give Covington any type of extra publicity than what he deserves. As for Covington, I do believe that that's an option that he can go about. Does Poirier want to do that? I mean, Poirier has looked historically bad against wrestlers. Khabib, he's looked bad against your better wrestlers in the lightweight division. I mean, I'm pretty sure you put him against Islam, he's going to lose as well too. So I'm not sure if Poirier takes that fight. But Covington, I think, if he has that fight, he could fight the winner of Gilbert Burns versus Hamza Chimaev if that doesn't want to get awarded for a title shot. I think Gilbert Burns versus Colby Covington is an amazing fight that could be made. I favor Hamza, defeating Gilbert Burns in the next month's pay-per-view. And then also, you could have Covington move up to 185. He's already talking smack up to Israel Adesanya. I'm not saying that he should get awarded a title shot at middleweight, but what I am saying is that he should fight Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker is in the same position that Colby Covington is facing, and Robert Whittaker was also a former welterweight. So you can have two welterweights, fighting at 185, for a number one contenders match. And I'm telling you right now, that would make a whole lot more sense than Dustin Poirier going up to 170 and just getting the same butt whipping that Jorge Masvidal got, or Colby Covington just playing gatekeeper, trying to make sure that nobody gets a title shot, and they would have to go through him to get it. As for Masvidal, it's very, very simple. Masvidal, you're going to have to put him against a striker. You can't put him against a wrestler. Don't put him against the Sean Brady's of the world. Don't put him against Michael Chiesas, all right? He's going to have to be placed against, a strong striker. Put him against somebody like I would say Conor McGregor. That makes a lot more sense. Nate Diaz, I know he's been wanting to have the Nate Diaz rematch. Does that happen? I highly doubt it. He did dominate Nate Diaz in that Madison Square Garden card. I do feel that, the UFC does not want to see that again, because they want to see Nate in a more competitive fight and not him just getting dominated by Jorge Masvidal. I think Conor McGregor is a very strong possibility for Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal has been wanting to fight him. Dana White has said that he's too big for Conor. Conor is too small for Masvidal, and Masvidal has been calling out Conor in the past for it. Does that fight happen? I think it fights eventually, but I don't know if it happens next for Masvidal. What's next for Masvidal? I don't know. I mean, I would love to see him fight, Conor. I mean, maybe he could even throw in Tony Ferguson at 170. That's a fight that I would like to see. RDA, put his hat in the mix. He says that he wouldn't mind fighting Jorge Masvidal. I just don't like the style up for Masvidal against RDA. I think RDA would just take him down and just leg kick him to the point where he's going to be grounded, and then RDA is going to capitalize on jiu-jitsu, putting maybe Masvidal to sleep, or just grounding and pounding him till the end of the round. But those are the few options right there for Masvidal. Going into the co-main event, we had RDA versus Renato Moicano. Renato Moicano was not supposed to be the original fighter. Supposed to be Rafael Fiziev. Rafael Fiziev ended up pulling out because of COVID. Does that fight take place again sometime later this year? Hopefully. That was a fight that I wanted to see happen. Originally, that fight was supposed to be a fight night main event for about 2 weeks ago, but it ended up getting pushed back for this pay-per-view. 5 rounds. Renato Moicano takes it on 4 days' notice. This guy's a G, guys. I mean, he ended up fighting at UFC 271 on the Israel Adesanya Robert Whittaker 2 card. Okay. And did work against Alexander Hernandez. Comes in on 4 days' notice to fight RDA, flies from Brazil, cuts the weight. I think he ended up cutting about like 21 pounds, makes weight, all right? It was a catch weight for 160 pounds, and RDA just went to work. RDA just took advantage of the fact that Renato Moicano needed to knock out RDA inside the first round in order for him to get a victory, and Renato Moicano just took all the damage in the world and was just still coming forward. Honestly, I gave it, what's it called, RDA winning all 5 rounds. He ended up, just doing the same thing that Colby Covington did, but except in round 5, Renato Moicano ended up capitalizing on a couple of punches, and where some judges awarded him by stealing the round. I gave RDA 50-44. It was a dominating victory. Renato Moicano's stock definitely did rise up. He became a legend with the fans. Taking all that punishment, taking the fight on short date notice against a first ballot Hall of Famer that is RDA, who's trying to make his another title shot run at lightweight division. Let's see what happens then. Next for RDA, I think you can award him with the Islam Makhachev fight. Remember, Islam denied fighting RDA on short notice. Because of that, Dana White did deny Islam for fighting for a title, so he's going to have to wait out. I think it makes sense to put RDA versus Islam. That fight, has a lot of tension. They both don't like each other. There's a lot of beef in history with one another. Remember, RDA wanted to fight Khabib. He could definitely fight his predecessor, Islam, and you could make that fight happen. As for Renato Moicano, I think Renato Moicano, he's going to get paid handsomely well. The only problem is, it's just that I think he's going to sit out for quite some time. I don't think we see Renato Moicano fight up until, give or take, maybe around October, November, just because of the amount of damage he ended up taking in such short notice. And not only that, he did fight Alexander Hernandez just 22 days ago, and I gotta tell you, that's going to be a long-lasting effect. If not, I won't be surprised if he doesn't fight for the rest of the year. And then we had fights with Bryce Mitchell versus Edson Barboza, another wrestling matchup where Bryce Mitchell just dominates. He drops Edson Barboza in the first round with a right hand and then just uses his wrestling. Barboza has never looked dominated like this since he ended up fighting Khabib many years ago. But Bryce Mitchell is the real deal at the featherweight division. I think he's only going to excel. What's next for him? I mean, you could put him against Giga Chikadze. That could be another easy victory for Bryce Mitchell because Giga just does not look well against wrestlers. As for Edson Barboza, I mean, I would love to see Edson Barboza just fight somebody that he could just strike with, and somebody he could strike with is Hakeem Dawodu. Put him against Hakeem Dawodu, make the fans fall in love with Edson again. I think Edson is a fantastic fighter at featherweight, but just unfortunately he's fighting a wrestler, and he just historically never does well against wrestlers. And then we had Kevin Holland making his debut at the welterweight division. He ended up fighting Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Round 1, I gave it to Cowboy. Cowboy ended up capitalizing. He was utilizing leg kicks. He felt disrespected because Holland wasn't respecting him during the fight. Cowboy ended up dropping Holland and then goes for a rear naked chokehold. I think to the end of time, Kevin Holland's going to be a glorified meme because as he was getting choked out, he ends up putting the thumbs up as of like, yeah, I'm good, what's up? And it was just plain hilarious right there. But Kevin Holland was able to capitalize, drops Cowboy Oliveira in the second round, goes for the finish, ground and pound, fights over. Kevin Holland wins in his debut, calls out Cowboy Cerrone, all right, and then takes it back. Says that maybe he shouldn't be fighting Cowboy Cerrone because, older guy and stuff like that. Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Kevin Holland fight Cowboy Cerrone. Just put him in fun fights. If not, have Kevin Holland versus Nico Price. Sign me up for that matchup. I'm in love with that matchup right there. Or Michelle Pieta, another matchup that I would be heavily in love with. As for Cowboy Oliveira, you could do the Cowboy versus Cowboy fight. That's always fun right there too. You could put him against any young up-and-comer. I mean, you have plenty of options for Cowboy Oliveira. I don't think it's time to cut ties with him with the UFC, but, that's just something that they could definitely talk about. And then lastly, the opener of the card, Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. Guys, I think the Greg Hardy experiment is officially over. Sergey Spivak just drops and takes down Greg Hardy inside of 50 seconds, grounds and pounds him, takes him down again. I think Greg Hardy, for what it's worth, yes, he made a mistake on what he did in the past, and the UFC ended up awarding him a contract because he ended up knocking somebody out in the Dana White Contender Series. You know, he always gets plenty of views because a lot of people don't like him and stuff like that, and I totally understand that. But I fully do believe that Greg Hardy should not be in the UFC, let alone opening up pay-per-view cards. All right, that's ridiculous right there. I think they should have definitely put Marina Rodriguez versus Zhao Nan, and I do feel like, you know what? Why is it that we're having him on the main card? Why? You know, what you can have former football players wanting to tune in to see how their former football, you know, player, friend, colleague, teammate, whatever, is doing now in the MMA world. Like, come on, guys. Like, there's no reason to have him on pay-per-view cards. If you want to have him on the fight night main card, by all means. But on a pay-per-view card, come on, guys. I mean, the guy's like, what, 7-5 right now? He's been losing ever since he's been on a downward spiral ever since he ended up taking that short notice fight against Alexander Volkov, and Alexander Volkov did work against him in Russia. But yeah, guys, that covers it all for the recap. Guys, let me know what you guys think. Should Masvidal fight Conor McGregor? What's next for Colby Covington? Should he go up to 185 and fight Whitaker? Should he fight Dustin Poirier? RDA? You know, what's next for him? There's plenty of options for him. You know, should he stick at lightweight? Should he go back up to welterweight? And what do you guys? What is your opinion on Kevin Holland on his welterweight debut? Will he be able to have a more successful you know, time at welterweight compared to middleweight? If not, let me know why. Until then, guys, I am Flavo Ariana. Thank you for tuning in to Flavo Ariana's MMA show. This covers everything for UFC 272. Until then, guys, I'm wrapping it up, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace, guys, and have a good one. See ya.